after the battle as looking or acting like a duck that had been hit on the head. I didn't see that kind of man, but I wondered, as I said, why didn't you do what you're suggesting you would do if you stayed? And while I was visiting with General Ord, an officer came in, I think a colonel, as I recall, dressed up in a dress uniform, and advised me that General Hooker, Joe Hooker, who'd been sent down by Meade at the request of the president and Halleck, Hooker's down with, I think, a couple of divisions, which I make note that Chattanooga situation was the only situation in the war where commanding generals from both the North and the South, in the Eastern Theater, rather, Lee and Meade, both sent substantial troops to the Western Theater. Hooker from the North and Longstreet from the South. Didn't happen any other time. But Joe Hooker is there. And his headquarters was a quarter mile from where my train car sat, which is what, about 1,500 feet. So Hooker, who's also just a few months ago was commanding the Army of the Potomac, sends a junior officer to me who informs me he's got a carriage, and he says, General Hooker, if you would like to see him, will entertain you at his headquarters, and I have a carriage outside. And I leaned forward and said, you may tell General Hooker that if he wants to see me, I will be here in this car. You're dismissed. Whereupon the officer colored and abruptly took his leave. And in just a few minutes, General Hooker came knocking at the door and calling on me, and was just as pleasant as he could be. And we passed a time of day, he and I and General Ord, for a little while, and then Hooker excused himself. Now, General Ord described that meeting as that General Grant had something of a stern visage and spoke in a definitive voice. You may tell General Hooker, if he wants to see me, I will be here in this car. And he said it surprised him that I had that visage and that tone of voice. But when he thought about it, he realized that I was using the appropriate tone of voice and language to squelch a potential challenge from a subordinate officer to his superior officer when that subordinate officer had been of a greater rank, commanding an army. And that Ord apparently felt it was appropriate that I do what I did. So in that time period that I spent in Stevenson, Alabama, I met two wise men and perhaps one not so wise man. I don't know, it's interesting when I think back on it. But General Ord and I traveled on to Bridgeport where he had his headquarters, and we got there the night of the 21st, and it's near Jasper, Tennessee. I camped with him in his tent, headquarters tent. And an anecdote, when we walked in his tent, large tent, there was a flask, whiskey flask, hanging in the tent. And Ord stammered and said, General, I'm sorry, that's not my flask. It's been left here by another officer. I don't drink. And I said, neither do I. And Ord said, I can't remember a single instance of having seen Grant drink in the campaign, or even hearing of it. But we stayed the night and talked, and the next morning, early at daybreak on the 22nd of October, there near Jasper, Tennessee, I got out, I mounted, well, I should say, I was put on my horse. Again, Ord describes it as Rawlins picked Grant up like a child and put him on his horse with his crutches strapped to his horse. And we bid adieu, and I started out on that 60+ mile trip over the ridge, hooking around to the right and then to the left, up, down, up some of the steepest terrain that possible to imagine a wagon being pulled up those hills. It had been raining, mud was belly deep on horses, bottom of the bed deep on wagons. We saw thousands of dead horses and mules that had died in the harness, been drove away by the troops. The stench was indescribable. There were 500 wagons that were stuck, immovable, in the mud. And we were picking our way and winding our way along Walden's Ridge. And there were places that it was felt too dangerous for me. I was on Jack, that it was too dangerous for me to attempt to cross. The horse might fall. So I was taken off the horses. We would hobble, I hobbled. We'd go up through the bad spot, and I'd be placed back on the horse. In spite of all that, as it's getting dark, Jack stumbled, and I fell, or he fell again on my left side. So the pain was indescribable. And this is a month, 6 weeks from September the 4th when I was injured. It's now evening of October 23rd. We traveled, it took us 2 days, the 22nd and all the 23rd. And late on the 23rd, I fell on that same left side. The horse fell on me, Fox fell on me at Pittsburgh Landing on the left side on April the 5th of 62. The horse, the Black Demon that I was riding in Carrollton, Louisiana, New Orleans, fell on me September the 4th on the left side, and I'm again on crutches. And now on October 22nd into 23rd, the horse falls on me on the same left side. But they saw that I was not seriously hurt, put me back on the horse, and in the evening after dark, in the rain, we got to George Thomas's headquarters inside Chattanooga. I was soaking wet, hadn't changed clothes in 2 days. I was cold, I was in great pain, but I was able to sit by a fire, and I immediately began taking reports from everyone. So by October 23rd, I'm in Chattanooga. After Vicksburg fell, I should like to tell you though, President Lincoln, I'm told, said, "Grant is my man and I am his for the rest of the war." So upon arriving in Chattanooga on October 23rd to help get the Army of the Cumberland out of a jam, the most serious crevice it's been stuck in, I must bring these reflections to an end and be back about my business. In the next reflection, I will look back on those 5 days in October that followed my arrival in Chattanooga on October 23rd, 1863. So for the moment, I am Major General of the Army U.S. Grant, bidding you an affectionate farewell.